Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to episode number 47 of the Lead to Greatness podcast, where we believe in helping others reach their greatest potential, and together we can change the world. Today on Lead to Greatness, we have Dominique Brightmon. Dominique is an award-winning speaker and a certified member with the John Maxwell Team. He is the best-selling author of Going North and Stand the Course. On today's podcast, that was three major things that happened in his life. Dominique discusses and talks about how reading changed a dark moment of his life when his life was changed forever. Please join me with Leaders or Readers with Dominique Brightmon.
This is Cedric Francis, and you're listening to Lead to Greatness.
Myself, like growing up, grew up as a church boy. If I was usually growing up in one of three places, either church, school, or really just outside playing with friends.
Yes, sir.
And growing up, had a pretty great childhood, been blessed with that. Great mom and dad. And I'd have to say the pivotal point in my life was the year that we lost Twinkies for a month and people thought the world was going to end, even though the whole world kind of ended for a lot of people 8 years later. The year of 2012 had this three-pronged attack where my father went out for a drive and then he got lost. We found him about a good 36 plus hours later because he was stricken with Alzheimer's. The doctor diagnosed it. Followed up with that, a month later, I turned 21 and I get into a car accident.
Wow.
So that's one heck of a birthday gift to unwrap. And praise God you're still alive, man, because I heard about the accident, man. I'm glad you're still here, my brother. Appreciate the good Lord still doing miracle work in the world. And it doesn't even stop there. To put the cherry on top of everything, got a call into my boss's office at the time. And I realized that this is even another lesson for life as we know it, is that your personal life will show up in your professional life because life is all around you. See your life as this one crystal orb of light because we all carry light within us. We all have souls. We're basically human beings having a heavenly experience because we're all energy inside these clay vehicles.
Yeah.
And she brought to my attention that I was screwing up in certain areas with a little miscommunication and things like that. And she was like, "Hey, you got to shape up here."
Yeah.
And in the conversation, she mentioned that there's going to be some new employees that she was going to be bringing on that were college students. And the job I had at the time was a part-time job at the library.
Mm.
And she was like, "Hey, they're going to be looking at you as a leader," because I had the job for 5 years at the time, holding it down since high school and parts of college.
Yeah.
And little did I know that subconsciously the word leader stuck in my mind. And that led me to picking up one of John Maxwell's books. And I went into this wonderful area of rebirth
Yeah.
where every year I would have a New Year's mantra, put that up there every year, have a theme for the year, and just grow off of that 1 to 3 word mantra every year and just focus for the better.
And you went through them so quick, man, but you just went through a series of adversity. Most of the time we have adversity in our life, man. I mean, things get tough for us, man. And some people don't recover from that adversity, man. So I just want, just to help somebody that's listening right now that may be, COVID-19. I just want to know how did you get past that adversity?
It was multiple things. My mother was one of them. Like in this case, one of the key people in my life because after the accident, I still had it was first day of my network security class
Mhm.
and I was still in the stupor. I was still in the trance and it was probably about an hour of silence. She was like, "Hey, like you got to wake up here. You've come too far to quit." And
Wow.
that's the thing. Like those listening right now, you've come too far to quit. If you made it to this episode of this podcast, you're on the right path and you've come too far to quit. Did you start yet? Maybe not yet, but you've come too far to quit because that's actually one of the worst places to quit is before you even get started. Those are probably two of the worst places to quit when you're about to start and when you're close to the finish line, especially when you're close to a finish line of something. Because that year in particular, that was my penultimate semester. I had 2 semesters to go, and that was the second to the last one. And I just needed those few credits to close out for the associate's degree in IT. And it was like, hey, like she reminded me of that. So I was able to get to class later on that day, was blessed to not have any injuries,
Mm.
able to finish off the degree. And also just not only reminding myself of that message, but also picking up wonderful books with inspirational messages, because
Mm.
that's something that we need to remind ourselves of. I have to probably call it just content absorption. nowadays because until last year, I would read at least 50 plus books a year.
Wow.
And my book reading time, my whole book reading schedule got thrown way off because of COVID.
Yeah.
And it switched over to YouTube for podcasts and videos and things like that. So even though I wasn't reading the physical books, which are, to be honest, a little slow in terms of content absorption, especially when people try to fill the darn
Killer
things up
grind.
nowadays. And I'm like, man, like I'll just take the podcast
Yeah. Yeah.
nowadays. I'll still read the books. I was able to read 37 books. I didn't get to 50, but I was still able to get close to that. But I still made up for it and still probably made the most money in my side business ever last year, still because I still took action. So just absorbing positive
Uh,
content that'll actually be applicable for my growth. So just having the right people, my lovely mom, who I'm still blessed to have today, and just absorbing the right content and taking action from it. Because that's another thing too. Like you got to absorb and then you got to take action. You
yeah.
can't just absorb all day and then get a beast with information and then walk around with the dad bod that like to advertise. You have like the beer belly and like the man boobs from all the information you're getting because you're not taking action and
Yes,
you're
sir.
going into the gym. Like you got to take action.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the library, it's actually interesting because that was a summer part-time job that I picked up because I was an introvert and mom again, she was like, "Hey, well, I got to find a way to get this kid some work experience. He's got to get ahead." And that summer she called up the local library. Was able to get a job, a summer youth internship, and I was 15 at the time and I didn't do anything stupid and my work ethic was good enough that they invited me back when I turned 16 a few months later.
Uh,
And just that was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me because being an introvert and even like getting my energy from not being around people in terms of recharging, but still learning how to commune and communicate with other people and just helping me to really find my new energy and just come out of my shell because I worked in a public library where we get at least a good 1 to 300 teens. Now, well, granted, this is pre-COVID, of course, but like 1 to 300 teens after school because we were right in front of a high school, and then we were a drop-off point for about 4 to 5 of the schools. Sometimes even 7 schools a few years ago and just all those kids after school on top of the customers in the community and then having certain areas for those that are birth to 5 and just being around all those people, customer service, like that's the thing nowadays. Like customer service is one way to really test how much patience you have and how far you're willing to see if you can work out your service muscle because it's a gift and a curse. The gift is you get to get better and not butter because you're around people, you get to interact with people. And the worst thing about it is the people, because sometimes the people can person can come in and have a bad day, and they see a human being, and they just want to throw all of their problems right on you for no reason, just because you're in their direct vicinity. It's
yeah.
like I'm just going to give it to the first person I see, and just having that experience just taught me like not only being around books, but being around people and getting out of my shell and finding my confidence because I was able to grow and transform from that experience.
Wow, man, that is awesome. That is awesome. What would you say the most exciting part about what you do?
The most exciting part about what I do is being able to encourage, inspire others, and heck, even sometimes entertain because with everything, like another thing about the library work is interacting with people. I get to practice some of my stupid jokes on people, and the good thing about it is they don't see it coming, which makes it even better for me. Is just seeing their expressions, like yeah. So you just basically just sign the pen right here, just lean on the pen. You can do it. Like what? Like what do you mean leaning on the pen? This is a stylist. What are you talking about, man?
Yeah,
And just cracking jokes on people and just using that content for when I'm just speaking with others and just practicing humor around people because a classic phrase that Jeffrey Gitomer likes to say is that if you can make them laugh, you can make them buy.
yeah,
And laughter is one of the greatest medicines on the planet that's natural. You don't have to pay for it. Like if you find something funny and you get a good laugh out of it, you'll feel a little bit better about your day. So just basically just the people. Like we all need each other. Like even those who want to say, "Oh, I don't want to be with people." Like, hey, you need people. Like, you wouldn't be here without people. I mean, like we all had to basically pay the rent in our mom's bellies for a good 9 months or so before it came out to the world here.
absolutely, absolutely. Just shift a little bit over towards, the leadership aspect. So I'm gonna ask you this question. What characteristics, value, and quality do you feel every great leader should have?
There's quite a few. I'll see if I can keep it down to three to make it easier. The first one that pops into my mind is emotional intelligence. Emotional
Mm,
intelligence,
wow.
because that's something that's been a requirement for the past few years and counting. 2020 shown that for a lot of people that emotional intelligence is a must for leaders, because with leadership, like, you're going to be around people. I like to define leadership as people see and people do. When people see you in action and they like what they see, they're going to take notice and they're going to replicate them if they like them. Or and if they love the actions, then someone else will see them take that action, and that'll be inspiration for them to achieve their own form of greatness.
Um,
And emotional intelligence is part of that, because folks like to talk about IQ for so long. It's like, oh, this person's got low IQ, this person has high IQ. Like, IQ don't mean nothing. If you have an high IQ and you can't communicate your vision, your message to other people effectively, then what is your IQ good to you? It's good for nothing. That's why EQ is really just being aware of the your emotions within yourself and being aware enough to read the room that you're in,
yeah,
because nowadays that skill is needed now more than ever. Being able to read the room, being able to read your own emotions, emotional intelligence is the first thing. The second thing is confidence.
mm,
Confidence is something that all leaders need, because there's going to be days where you're going to have little to no information and you have to go with what you have, and you're going to have to sell your vision to people. And you don't have to see selling as, hey, I got this used car that's really two lemons that's gonna break down as soon as you get home, because we adjusted it so that way it'll look good enough so you can
yeah,
get home and you won't have to complain to us the same day. No, you have to. Selling is actually just offering something of value to someone else that'll help them with their problems. And when you're in leadership, especially from my experience of seeing it from other people, like, sometimes you're going to be getting messages from the higher ups that you're gonna have to deliver to other people, and you yourself don't believe it yourself. I'm like, man, if I don't buy into this, they're sure as heck not gonna buy into it, especially when people have high BS meters. And I'm talking about belief systems here. Like, people like, hey
yeah,
man,
yeah, love
like they have a certain belief system
it.
that doesn't agree with what you're trying to preach to me. So if you don't believe it, you're not gonna be able to confidently sell that to others. So emotional intelligence, confidence, and the third thing is effective communication, because with the first two, being aware of yourself and being able to read the room and being aware of other people and being confident and be able to keep yourself as confident as you can, you have to also be able to communicate effectively. And I'm not just talking about the one-on-one conversation. I'm also talking about all forms of communication. There's the written communication that's
Yeah.
needed now more than ever. Do you look back on the text messages or the emails you send? Because these darn smartphones will make you look like you got a dumb phone because of the darn autocorrect if you don't look back at it.
Oh man.
And when you're sending out
Give me
email,
the phone.
the greatest leadership lesson I've learned was through experience, and that was in Toastmasters, a volunteer organization. If anyone wants to lead people, join Toastmasters or any volunteer organization and try to lead people, because you don't have a carrot and stick. You can't, like, in with a job, they're there because they want to get paid and they want to feed their family and survive. In a volunteer organization, they're there because they want to be there for their own goals. So that's the major thing. And the major leadership lesson is that don't expect everyone to keep up with the pace that you're setting. Because one year in particular, I actually inherited the leadership position of club president of a certain club, and it was a rebuild year, because the 2 years before, we had one guy, he was in sales, he basically knew how to recruit people. He probably could even dominate in the network marketing field, like the people he brought in. We had like 50 members
Mhm.
in that club, like 50, 54, close to it. Following year, we got to a good 30 or so. And then when I took reins over president the year after that, we were down to 12. So I basically had to try to help to rebuild it, at least back up to 20, because that's the level of an average surviving club that can thrive. 20 members, enough
Wow.
members so that we can have some variety, some communication, keep things fun. Because trying to do a one-man show or trying to run a meeting with three people in that particular meeting, it's not fun at all. It's not fun at all from experience. And there were some days where I would still be so focused on the vision that sometimes people were still not really fully dedicated into the mission, because one guy in particular, he was moving into a new home. Another person in particular, they actually were so nervous one day because we kind of, uh, and this is probably another even hidden lesson, is the fact that he was so good with his speech, and he made so many people laugh that me and a couple other people encouraged him to compete in this humorous speech contest because he was so funny and had everybody in the room laughing. But he was holding his head and he was shaking, and he was just chomping at the bit, like so nervous that I think we probably put a little too much confidence into him that day because we didn't see him after that, and he took a 2 month trip across Europe
Oh,
afterwards, and he never came back to the club. So I was basically down to rebuilding the club back to 20 plus members, a mix of newbies and experienced officers where some were moving, some had issues where they may have got their house robbed and things like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, so everybody wasn't able to keep up. But you yourself, if you're like kind of like the quarterback football team, like during the victories, if the team wins, you blame the team for the victory. If there's times when you're feeling down and you may take a loss, like hey, that falls on you, and you just have to be able to keep going and stay encouraged and encourage yourself some days to keep on going. So don't expect others to always keep up with the pace that you're setting.
yeah. Awesome. 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 Well, you say inherited. What did you mean by you inherited and not you volunteer for it?
It was, let's see, that was probably my third year in Toastmasters.
Right.
And that was the year where a lot of the more seasoned members, they were visiting other Toastmasters clubs and not showing up as much to that meeting because heck, probably even kind of like in the church too sometimes, where it's like the what is it, the harvest is plenty but the laborers are few.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
So I was like, well, I was one of the few left that was actually competent and willing to take on the position of club president that year. And I was excited about it. I'm like, okay, cool, I'll go for it. And there's one other person who was excited for, but they're like, they really didn't have enough real. They had the willingness, but they just didn't have the experience. So they're like, okay, well let's go with Dom, and was able to get it that year. So that's what I mean by inherited, because they still voted me in and everything like that. But that's basically what happened since we lost so many members because folks, we had like 50 a couple years before, but when the one guy that brought him in left, they were really showing up for him. Like they just left because he left. So
How has failure shaped you in your entrepreneur journey?
failure. My goodness. I got to quote one of my past guests on the Going North podcast, Colonel George A. Milton, who retired, I believe, from the U.S. Army, if I'm not mistaken. And he said on my show that failure is the greatest resource of all time because your failures will teach you what to do next time when you have another opportunity.
Wow.
And failures, well, if you see failure as the key to your success, he even calls himself a failure coach. Like that.
Wow.
And ever since that just took my whole view of failure to another level because I like to see L's, losses as lessons. But
Wow.
after he dropped that on me, I'm
That's
like,
dope.
dude,
That is a
I'm like,
whole different ball game, man. Man,
yeah.
a knowledge bomb for the colonel, man. That is wow. That's huge. I want to shift now to your books, man. You're young, and you already have 3 books, man. And your first best-selling book. Let's talk about that first. Going North: Tips and Technique to Advance Yourself. What inspired you to write this book?
Yeah, that's definitely a interesting question indeed when I think back of the process because the it all started when heck this even goes back to Toastmasters. I actually went to a meeting, and funny enough, this was a meeting at the club I eventually became president of where they had a guest speaker
Mhm.
that evening, and he dropped this wonderful presentation called How to Act Like a Leader.
Hmm.
And he was selling books afterwards. And the guy, he was dressed to the nines, and he was only a year or two older than me. I think because I was around 22 at the time, he was 24. And that was the seed that was planted in my mind. And I eventually got to this wonderful book by David, I believe his name's David Schwartz. He also wrote The Magic of Thinking Big, but he has another book that is just as powerful called The Magic of Getting What You Want.
Hmm.
And one of the activities in that book was to write your own obituary. And I decided, you know what? I think I'm gonna do this just for the heck of it. Because what's the good? The value of the book comes when you take action from it.
Wow.
So in my obituary after doing that activity, I wrote I was going to be a best-selling author of multiple books. And after I did that activity, a few months came down the road, and I met a lady at a conference, and she asked me, "Where is my book on this certain list I was handing out to people called the 100 Books for Dynamic Living?" Now, mind you, this is a few months after I did the obituary activity, and I was like, "Nope, my name's not on the list because I'm not an author. Like, the heck am I going to write about?" I'm like 23 at the time, and she was like, "Hey, why don't we both write books a year from today? We could both say we're published authors." And I was like,
Ooh.
nope, not doing it. But you gotta admit though, like that's a certain kind of good person is actually
That's
gonna really
awesome.
challenge you like that. Heck, a year later, the book actually published it because even though I didn't accept the deal, we didn't shake on it. A couple days later, did some soul searching, realized, wait a second, I said I wanted to do this. And that was the key to opening the door to taking that action. So taking that action led to the first book, and that book is basically a nice little package where I take stuff that I've actually done in my life and I truly believe and share with other people. Because that's another thing too nowadays. You have to share and teach what you truly believe in with people. Because if you don't, people are going to call you out on it. They're going to be like, "Man, this is some BS right here. Like, like, do you really believe this, man?" It's like, "Yeah, I do." That's why I put it in this book. And that's why it's so short and small because one, it's something I believe in, something I live. And two, people don't have time for 5,000 pages.
Exactly. We're gonna talk about that. You have another best-selling book, and that's Stay the Course. Elite Performers, Seven Secret Keys to Sustainable Success. What was the story behind that one?
Yeah, that book actually was supposed to be the follow-up book. It originally was gonna be called Still Going North. Funny enough, I was gonna do a play on the words like, yeah, we got going north, we got still going north, and
Uh,
then we got I'm not north yet, but I'm still going. Like it that was originally gonna be the joke title, but that book came from a place of lack of self-awareness, and that's one of the reasons why emotional intelligence is one of the things I noted as one of the qualities of a leader because like with leadership, we lead ourselves first before we lead other people.
um,
And I was leading myself down a dark path because my father passed away. I believe it was 6 months after the first book was published
wow.
because he caught dementia and he had a bad fall the night of it was probably about a good like the day after Christmas, like that Monday night, like 1 a.m. in the morning. And he never recovered from that. And I was going through some grief and I thought I was over it because even though like we were there during his last hours when he was still alive, I was full of energy afterwards, being able to get things done for the home and everything. But the day after the funeral was all over, since we had to wait 2 weeks since he was a veteran and everything, it set in, but it was subconsciously, I didn't really realize it. And I was just slacking off with my day job and all sorts of other projects. And my boss had to call me in again and was like, "Hey, you sure you're okay here?" And then just showed me all the things where I screwed up. And I'm like, "Oh, darn, this again. Wow. All right. Well, I guess I haven't learned this lesson yet for real. Like to turn your L's into lessons, huh?" And it realized like that I was lacking that self-awareness. And that was the thesis of the book that elite performance happens when you're self-aware, and it goes into 5 different areas of self-awareness along with 2 other keys to help you to reach that peak performance state and to stay in it because that's where I was lacking. I was able to get some coaching in and be able to get coached back to a new level of peak performance and be able to stay there long enough to get this book out and to be able to keep going to even more projects in the future. So that's really where book 2 came from, just a lack of self-awareness and realizing like, hey, like this book, it's really not even though other folks are gonna read it and folks will get something out of it, like it's still for me too. Sometimes it's kind of like those times when you hear the past, like, man, sometimes I feel like I'm preaching to myself here. It was like sometimes you gotta write to yourself.
And that is awesome, man. Man, one thing, man, is that everyone is saying about your books, man, that your books zero fluff. I mean, it's no fillers, there's no fluff in it. I mean, you get right to the point. Your book is accurate. I mean, it's like, I mean, the lesson is back to back. I mean, it's not all this a 500-page book that could have really been 20 pages. I mean, you just literally, you get to the point, man. So, man, so when are you working on your next book?
Yeah, working on it as we speak. I'm still polished. I gotta practice what I preach, right?
That's awesome, man. That is so amazing, man. So yeah, so definitely be looking out for that. Do you have a time frame yet?
Hopefully by the end of 2021, we'll see what happens. That because originally supposed to be spring, but after talking with a buddy of mine yesterday, I was like, okay, I might need to polish this up even more because sometimes you have like the raw rock, the ore, but
Yeah.
it's like I still probably have to do some chipping away, some refining, and seeing when the gold's going to come out of this. So it's going to be yeah, it's going to be hotter than fish grease. That's the plan.
Yes, sir. Man, I love it. 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 What are some leadership growth tips, tools, advice that you can share with the Lead to Greatness community to help us reach our greatest potential?
Sure thing. So, in addition to my books and Cedric's future book that he's probably going to be releasing during the near future, because I know he's going to be doing it because he's got a good word to share with everybody,
Thank you.
is a book by John C. Maxwell called The 15 Laws of Growth. Like that book is powerful. I even preferred like the smaller version, How Successful People Grow, but the original tome, The 15 Laws for Growth and the Law of Sacrifice. Like you have to give up to go up. There are going to be times when like leadership, especially self-leadership, there are going to be times where if you want to get to that new level, you're going to have to give up something. That you can't go into a new area with old mess. Like you, you just can't do it. Like you're gonna need a home organizer if you're gonna try that. And that's really one of the biggest things that just sticks out to me is like if the law of sacrifice, like all those who have gotten to new levels, they had to sacrifice something different. Like Moses, like he had to sacrifice his comfort level being on a different land to go back to Egypt to let his people go and
Uh,
be able to be the leader that he was. Like Tom Brady, he even though love him or hate him, like no matter what the news says about him, like he left the New England Patriots to go to a stacked Tampa Bay Buccaneers team so he could get that seventh ring.
yes,
Like he gave up his home area to go down where there was warmer weather and a stacked team that'll help him get to the championship where he can still throw picks and he can still win games. Like there's times where you're gonna have to sacrifice things to really get to that next level. And heck, even another tip for leaders is to also focus more on giving yourself some time to do some deep breathing, some meditation. Like give yourself a good 5 minutes a day.
uh,
It can expand into 30 minutes a day if you want. Heck, even one guy in particular I had in my show, he would meditate at least 1 to 2 hours every day for 10 plus years because he was so depressed that he had to clear some negative thoughts in his mind. Like you got to give yourself the gift of solitude
uh,
so he can masterfully serve the multitude. Like you have to
uh,
give yourself that silence first.
uh,
So that way you'll be able to have that inner peace, that inner joy that surpasses all understanding. Like,
mm.
so that just make sure you give yourself silence and know what you have to sacrifice.
Yes, 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 yes. Man, knowledge bombs, knowledge bombs, knowledge bombs, knowledge bomb. Man, it is.
Man, Five Loves of Leadership, like that was the original book that actually I read from Maxwell. I actually listened to it on audio first because I was having heavy commute times to and from class, and I was like, wow, like all right, I like it. It's just so darn true that you really need to gauge yourself and have other folks gauge you as well, so that way you can compare and contrast. And heck, I like to call it the mirror force yourself method, where sometimes you ask other people like, hey, what are three things I'm good at, three things I need to work on,
Mm,
and some of the things that they listed on both sides surprised me.
uh,
Like, because sometimes we can be blinded by ourselves. We can it's kind of heck. Even remember one time my pastor said this, like sometimes like folks who may go to church, especially those old school churches, we go in the stained glass windows and we sometimes walk around with stained glass windows. We have our eyes closed.
ooh,
And sometimes we have to let go of the stained glass that we have in front of our eyes. Things may look beautiful on the outside to us, but those around us may know our blind spots that we ourselves may not be aware of. So yeah, that book is powerful, man.
man.
It's powerful. It
And I like
expands.
out of this book, man. But the two questions, I'm gonna read these questions again, man. It's so powerful, man. Knowledge bomb. And the questions he just raised is, um, what am I good at? And what do I need to work on? Man, those are some awesome questions. Every leader, and you know what? We all leaders. Some of us, you may not have the position, but you're a leader. You're leading your family. You're leading somebody. Somebody's watching you. If you're an uncle, there's some nephew around, think you're the coolest uncle in the world. So you're leading somebody. And those are questions that we need to ask the people that we're surrounded around. If someone wanted to connect with you and what you're doing, where should they go?
Yep. Head over to dombrightmon.com, dombrightmon.com. If you leave your name and your email, you get a free gift called the 21 Lessons Learned from 2+ years of podcasting. If you're looking to start a podcast of your own, heck, even if you want to promote what you're currently doing, whether it's like a book or your business too, because some of the stuff can apply. Like, definitely check that out all on dombrightmon.com. And be sure to listen and subscribe to the Going North podcast. New inspirational content every Monday and Thursday. So check it all out on dombrightmon.com.
On behalf of the Lead to Greatness community, man, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and adding value to us.
Man, I'm grateful for this time with you, my friend. You got a great thing going here. Love what you're doing. Keep it up. Keep it up, because greatness is definitely in your wheelhouse. Keep it up, my man. Appreciate you.
And don't forget to subscribe to Lead to Greatness if this is your first time. And this podcast was helpful to you, leave a big thumbs up. And also, I want you to check out our Marriage Coach podcast, the podcast with my wife and I. If you're on iTunes, please rate this podcast and leave a review and help get the word out. Again, thank you, Lead to Greatness Nation, for joining us on today. Looking forward to seeing you again on next week. Till then, remember, if you help others reach their greatest potential, together we can change the world. Peace. We out.